Good morning, home church. It is a morning with us, anyways. I don't know what time it'll be whenever you're listening to this. We do have a special guest with us sitting right next to me. Would you like to introduce yourself, special guest?
I would. I am Sarah Converse. I am the proud owner of Backwoods and Bare Feet Chainsaw Carvings, and I'm even prouder to be a member of the home church.
There we go. And how long have you been a member of home church?
Um, I think about 3 months.
There we go. And Sarah has a story, one in which uh, I think is very podcastable. Would you explain to us why it is you ended up at home church?
Well, we were looking for a church. We've been looking for a long time. My husband is a minister, and you threw me off. By the way, this is unscripted, just in my defense. My husband has been a minister for most of his life. Got married when I was 15, and he threw that on me right off. We've been married 36 years, but later on in life, we decided to pastor our own church, and then COVID hit 2020, and so the building that we wanted to rent fell through because of COVID, and we ended up in our living room. So we had about 15 people starting with, ended up with about 25, and that got knocked down because of COVID again. Long story short, we had a house fire, and that killed the church right there. So devil thought he won, but he didn't. Um, it's kind of a weird story. Do you want me to tell the story?
We'll definitely go into more depth on it, and so we'll take a little bit of a side cut right there for just a second. Um, Sarah did make the comment that she didn't get a script on this. Mandy made the comment. That's so that's we're just going to go back and basically reiterate and kind of give Sarah an idea, and for those of you maybe that this is the first time listening to the podcast, basically what we do here is um, home church did kind of start as an online, it was that COVID sort of deal. So the live streaming was big, and a lot of people that were watching from the live stream came to the physical building. Some stayed online, some watch online at home, and some people just don't know people from home church. So what we wanted to do with this podcast was get people whose faces you see in here every Sunday. You may not know a whole lot about them. You may have just scratched the surface. It's like the surface. I knew the story. Clayton told us a story about your house burning and all of that situation. So I've scratched the surface, and I know just a little bit about Sarah. Our goal on this podcast is maybe if me and Zach don't know who you are, everybody else gets to know who Sarah is. We got to visit a little bit before the podcast started, and that's kind of what the script is. The script is we're just going to sit here. I may throw a few questions at you. We like to dig deep, so that way the people that are walking with Christ and they're having a difficult time, um, we can hopefully, that light, like Clayton was talking about during prayer this morning, that light, we let it out and we let it shine so that these people see, hey, they really do care for us. They really are here for us. And if it's home church, like Clayton says, if you don't want home church, there are other churches out there. We want you to get settled in. We want you to find Jesus. It's not about um, being cool and popular. It's about Jesus. And so that's what we're here to do, is just have you spread your story about Jesus, your encounters with Jesus. And so with that being said, Zach, is there anything that you would like to add before we dive in deep?
And the reason why we don't give you guys a script is that way it's personal and real. That it's not, uh, I guess, fully polished, because nothing here at home church is 100% polished. So we like to keep it kind of raw and uh, real. So that's why if you guys come on, that we won't ever tell you an agenda or a plan or what we're going to ask you or anything like that. So
So I'll start it off here. Were you always in a Christian environment as you were growing up, or was Christ something that was introduced to you later on in life?
Technically, I was born and raised in a Baptist church. to kind of fill in, and I hate to just jump it in there, but my whole life is just a jump. So we'll just do that, and I apologize. I'm as country as cornbread, so I am just, I'll get the hang me, twang me stuff down, and I may say something that is just off the wall. But anyway, when my first remembrance, and this is, I hope this is okay, of my childhood, I was abused, very abused. My father sexually abused me. My mother physically abused me. So as a child, that was my childhood memories. The only good ones, pretty much, was of my brothers and sisters. Blocked a lot of stuff out. So, needless to say, when I was 15, a lot of people think that's way too young to get married, and I believe it is too young. But God worked a miracle in that situation, and that's a story in itself. There, I believe that God sent my husband to save me in a sense from the chaos that I was in, because I had tried to commit suicide as a young kid, and if it hadn't have been for my husband, then I wouldn't be here now. So anyway, got married young. I was thrown into a United Pentecostal church. I don't know if I'm allowed to say denominations, but I was thrown into that. Didn't understand a lot of their theologies and stuff, but the abuse that I was suffering at home, you didn't ask, you didn't question, you did what you were told. I always had a relationship with God, even as a little kid. That when the abuse was happening, I prayed a lot. Even 5, 6 years old, I remember praying, God, take me. You know, I didn't want to live. I didn't want to be in this situation, but and I'm going to get emotional. So anyway, God did save me. God answered my prayers, and a lot of people may say, well, he didn't save you from that abuse, but he gave me the strength that it took to get through that abuse. So I've been through a lot since I was little. I suffered at the hand of abuse either way. Many bruises. I have lots of scars. I've had surgeries because of those scars. Like I said, 36 years of marriage, and we've suffered 2 miscarriages. Later on in the miscarriage, one was 5 months, one was 6 months. So we buried 2 children. Lots of surgeries. I've had 9 tumors. I've had cancer. We've suffered 4 house fires. None were our faults. The first one was a propane block that we lived in a trailer park, and it was not upkept very well at all. Second one was 6 months later, and our neighbor, their house blew up and caught ours on fire. I did receive a medal for that because I saved 2 little boys out of a fire and burnt myself in the process, but the mother and another little boy died in that fire. Suffered a lot of mental issues after that. Had to be medicated. Again, I tried to commit suicide. I've done that 2 or 3 times just because the churches that we were in did not believe in getting help, getting therapy. That was not of God, they thought. And here I was, a 15-year-old girl that had dealt with abuse all my life, and I was just told to pray about it, and that was it. And it wasn't until later on in life when one of the UPC, United Pentecostal ministers, had been praying, and God showed him that that was not the way, not truly, and he had enlightened him a lot that some of the things that were being preached was not of the Bible. It was just, a lot of man's rules and stuff like that. And he had told me, Sarah, just to be honest, the way he did it, I'd quit church. Not that I quit God, but I quit church. I felt like every time I went to church, no one wanted to understand me. They looked at me as this broken, I couldn't do anything. I felt like a broken crayon. But inside, I knew even broken crayons still color. I still had something. I felt like I had something to offer, but no one wanted what I had to offer because my life was so much, and so it is. I mean, who goes through what I've went through, and I tell people this, and it's like, really, Did you really suffer 4 fires? I've been in 6 totaled out car wrecks that I've had to be cut out of. My legs are fully scarred up and down. I've had hundreds of stitches from car wrecks that have just been totaled out. I got shoved up and under a car, my car got shoved up and under a school bus. It took them 4 hours to cut us out. It's just, my life is not anything but full of miracles. There's a song, I think it's by Elevation. It's Miracles Upon Miracles. I think it's called Millions. That is my life. It's just literally, he has kept me from tragedies. He's kept me from suicides. He's kept me from so much. It's almost overwhelming. And I'm looking at your guys' faces and you're thinking, oh my God, what did we get into on this podcast? But it's so much. And think of it coming from my mind. It's just, whenever I finally did, and I'll squirrel around. My nickname is Squirrel for a reason. Back whenever this pastor, and I'll just say him, it's Tyler Pageant. I am forever indebted to Tyler Pageant. He is still the pastor of the Courageous Church. We went there for years. And he told me one time, he said, Sarah, I had been out of church for about 2 years, would not go. And I came back. I just decided, I'm going to go back to church. My kids were killing me saying, Mom, we want to go back to church. And so I was okay because I prayed every morning. I talked to God. I read my Bible. And I thought, okay, I'm okay. I don't need church. And the kids got me talked back into going. And he told me, he said, Sarah, I'm not going to let you come back. And my heart hit the floor. I'm like, what? What kind of pastor tells me I can't come back to church? And he told me, he said, until you go get help. He said, you're going to hurt yourself or you're going to hurt somebody. Well, at first I was offended. And, then he told me, he goes, I'm going to pay, or the church is going to pay for your therapy. And I had never heard that before because I thought, okay, every church I've been to, which was United Pentecostal, never allowed that. That was, if you have to go to therapy, you don't believe in God. You're leaning to man, not to God. And I thought, okay, this is not right. So I went to therapy. Long story short, I had never talked about my past to anyone, never talked to anyone about my hurts and my pains. I kept everything inside, and I was an angry person. I had been court-ordered anger management because I had dealt with so much anger in my later days. That's a whole nother story. But I had, to tell you a little about me that people don't know, other than my close family, I have led a life that I attended church every Sunday, every Wednesday, but yet I dealt with alcoholism, I dealt with drugs, I held a gun to 2 people's head, a lot of anger issues. A lot of people look at me like, oh my gosh, there's no way. But yeah, you'd be surprised what people hide inside and the chaos that goes on underneath. But God delivered me from all of that. And it was finally whenever I decided that, I'm not going to allow religion. I hate religion. There I said it. I hate religion. God hates religion. Religion is man-made. Christianity is of God. God is what I believe. The Bible is what I believe. But religion is, it's so many rules made by man. Anyway.
Let's just I'd like to backtrack on something just real quick. So you made the comment about the preacher saying to you that he didn't want you coming back until you got help. Mm-hmm. And I think you made a comment earlier about how people think seeking help is wrong. And here's the thing, like you said, when you held all that stuff in and you didn't want, you were just, I can kind of relate to you in the sense of you hold it in until you eventually have to let it out. And unfortunately, instead of doing it God's way, which is through prayer and going to Him and through Him you tend to release it in anger. And so whenever you keep these things pinned up, that's why things like, this podcast are good. You talk to people, and God sometimes says, okay, you've told me your problem. You need to get over yourself and over what you think you're doing. You need to let that piece of you go. And
Exactly.
sometimes in order for you, because that was one of my big selfish, my ego, you got to let go of that ego, and you think that just not letting anybody know makes you stronger, but
Yeah.
it's letting people know that helps them. So it's good that you realize the process of, hey, I do need help, and sometimes it takes more than continually just being by yourself. You think sometimes, okay, God says it's me and God, it's me and
Mm-hmm.
God, and there's sometimes parts of you that need to be broken down in front of other people for your sake. So I'm not saying that people think suffering and stuff like that. I'm not saying
Right.
that this is a repercussion, because something like abuse in that nature, and you didn't go too deep at all with it, because that's what people think. It's too deep for church. No, 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 no. That's what church needs. Church needs those wounds to be healed. God needs those wounds to be healed, because you are going to be able to speak so much more greatly about this situation, about what God can do it. Because when you held it in for how long, it didn't do anything. When you didn't let God work in it, it just stayed there, and it just manifested itself into something deeper. So whenever it came to the abuse and that situation, what was it that really helped you let go of, or would you say you still maybe hold a little bit? Is there any piece of you, what helped you let go of that? What helped you? And we know it's Jesus, we know it's God, but what were the processes and the steps that you took to say, you know what, God, I'm better for that? Or is it still something that's a work in progress?
It'll always be a work in progress, but I think a big turning point for me was through the therapist that I went through. Tim Lyons from Safe Harbor is where I went, and he would explain to me certain things, and he got to telling me, he goes, Sarah, your abuse and your past is like a big sore. And he said, you have you got this big wound on you, and he said that memories pick at that wound, and he said you got it infected. It's the anger and the resentment, and I blamed my mom for not saving me from my dad, but I blame my dad for you know the abuse that he was doing that caused my mom to be so angry. So I just wanted someone to blame. And whenever I went through the therapy, he had told me, he said, you are like this big sore that is just festering. And I would sit there and I'd be like, don't say that. That's just gross. And he goes, but it is gross. Sin causes this gross thing, and he got graphic, and I was just sickened by the way he would call it. But it was like, that's the way God sees things. It was like this big, pardon the pun, big, pussy sore. And he goes, what would you do if you had this big boil that was just gross and oozy? And I'm like, oh my God, you're going to make me sick. Get it off, get it off. And he's like, exactly. He goes, that's sometimes what we got to do. He goes, you got to peel that scab off, scrape that crap out, apply the salve, and let it heal. And that's what we began to do. I had never talked about it, so I scraped that scab off. I began to talk about it. I cried, I yelled, I hit things, and then it was like it was out. That that infection inside of me could begin to heal. And he would give me scriptures to read, and that was like the salve that I needed. For once in my life, someone was telling me, "Hey, it's not your fault." No one had ever told me that. For years as a kid, I always thought, what did I do? Was I just so bad as a kid that this was my punishment? And I was always taught, God's behind every corner. He's watching everything you do, and in my mind, I thought God was looking around every corner, just waiting to whop me upside the head like Mom did, you know. And that was not it at all. Matter of fact, I got this tattoo on my wrist. It's an infinity. It says love. I got that right after therapy as a reminder, because every time I would try to hurt myself, or every time I would just, throw my fist up, I could remind myself God's love is infinity. There is no end. He is not out to get me, as in, he's not, he knows my hurts. He knows my pain. He knows my suffering, and he cares. It doesn't say that God's going to save you from everything, but it does say that God would give you the strength to make it through it, and he did. I forgave my dad, literally, and a lot of people think, if you knew, and I would never, I'm not there yet anyway enough to speak of all the horrible things that I went through as a child, but believe me when I say it, I'm on medication for it. We'll just put it that way. Nightmares, stuff like that, things that children should never, ever have to suffer through from parents or anybody as far as that goes. But I remember saying to the therapist at the end of my therapy, and he asked me, he says, what have you got out of all this? And I said, I want to be that person that was not there for me. I want to be there to find that little girl that was hiding, or that was locked in places, and that no one ever found me. I want to be able to find that person and be that hope that I felt like I couldn't find back then. But there was a time that was toward the end of the therapy, and he had mentioned, my dad had passed away. And right before he had passed away, I had got to a point, I begged God, I wanted my dad back. My dad was not who abused me. It was someone that he allowed in his life to take over, I guess. There was the Bible says that we don't fight against flesh and blood. We fight against spirits. And I believe that there was a spirit on my dad. My dad was a loving person. And my mom was too. And me and my mother, we have a great relationship now. And, but my dad, I love my dad. People, they never understood whenever my dad got arrested for what he did. No one believed it. My dad was very well liked in the community. He was, everybody knew him. And it was just, I was just a little girl that, for some reason, I told a lie on my dad, or that's what they thought, until all the facts come out and medical records showed, and the truth came out. But my dad, before he had died, he got very sick and was in the hospital, and me and my husband, I went up to see him. And on his deathbed, there was about 5 pastors that I knew personally, was actually in the ICU room next to my dad. And they were all praying for somebody over there. And whenever I came through, I knew all of them, and they seen me, and they knew my husband had been a minister, so, they automatically asked what we were up there for. And I told them, I said, my dad, is really bad off. And they asked, they said, could we go over and pray for him? By all means, please do, So we brought him over, and there was these 5 ministers, and me and my husband, and I was at the head, my husband was at the other side of his head, and they all came in, and my dad was very weak, and he could talk, but he was very weak, and he sat up in his bed when they asked him if he could pray, or if they could pray for him, and he sat up in his bed, and my husband kind of helped him, and he told him, he said, before you pray, now if you knew my dad, this was not in the norm for him, but he sat up in his bed, and he said, before you pray, I want to ask forgiveness. And he turned to me, and he told me, he said, I want you to forgive me for what I've done. And in front of all the ministers, he asked them to pray for forgiveness. And he said, I don't know what she's told you, but he said, I guarantee it's true. And I knew that God knew that I needed to hear that. just because I needed them to know I didn't lie about this. Sometimes things happen in secret, and you never know what people are going through because I didn't tell anybody. When people say, oh, well, why didn't they come out with that? Because we're so embarrassed and we're so ashamed of, really, we don't know, I guess, what it is that we're ashamed of, but it's the pain, I guess. But anyway, he asked me that, and immediately it was like he had never done anything to me. I forgave him, and I knew I truly forgave him. And I wrapped my arms around him, and I was so happy. I felt like, oh my God, I got my dad back. I felt like all that pain and suffering and all those bad memories and the anger was gone. And I was so thrilled. I I remember going home from the hospital that day, and I was so excited. I was just on cloud nine, and my dad lived in a little trailer by himself, and no electric, or he had electric, but no water. He'd go haul his water for his horses and stuff. And I remember going home, and I was so excited. I told my husband, I said, we got to go to the store. I'm going to go because Dad was supposed to come home the next day. I said, I'm going to go and I'm going to buy Dad all these groceries, so he can eat healthy and so he'll be better off and whatnot. And so we went and we bought tons of groceries that he didn't have to cook, just kind of throw in the microwave, but yet healthier stuff. And I was so excited. I went home and I was praying and thanking God, thank you for my dad back. I feel like this is a new release on life and all this. And my brother called me. Yeah, it was like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I had just got back from the grocery store and was really excited. And I seen my brother's name on the phone, and I'm like, hey, how are you? And he goes, Sarah, are you home alone? And I was like, yeah, I mean, kids are here. I said, why, what's going on? He goes, well, I need to talk to you. He goes, but when does Dawn get home? I'm like, what's going on, John? He's like, well, when does Dawn get home? I'm like, I don't know, 4 or 5 o'clock. I'm like, what's going on? And he didn't want to tell me. And I finally got it out of him, and he said, Dad just passed away. And it was like, my heart, when I say it broke, it truly broke. Because I felt like I just got that back, and then, my mind went, why? Why? Why did God give me this and then just take it away? Why? And I went through this whole pity party on, but God, I just, forgave him, and I just, all this blah, blah, blah. And it was like God spoke to me and reminded me of a prayer that I had prayed years before. I had tried to forgive him many times, and it would just be like I could not let go of that anger and that I want him to feel the pain that I felt, kind of thing. And I had prayed. I thought, Lord, and this was in one of my angry moments, believe it or not, I had prayed, Lord, you know what? If he would ever hurt another person, just make his heart right with you and take him. Just do it, Just make sure he's right with you, and then stop his heart. And I said that out of anger, is what I said it. Well, immediately, whenever I was praying after my dad passed, that prayer popped in my head. And I felt the awfulest guilt. Because I thought, oh my God, did I pray him dead? What did I pray? Because that prayer popped up in my head. And then it was like this peace. Wouldn't that be better? I don't know if my dad would have ever hurt anyone. I don't know. But I know that he made it right with God before he left, because when they prayed for him, he asked for forgiveness, and he raised his hands, and he began to pray, and he actually prayed in tongues, and it was just a beautiful moment with God there in the ICU. And I knew that he had made it right. Not that I needed to know, but I know that God allowed me to see that, and that was the peace that I needed. And it was like God began to work on me and say, you're not perfect. Sure, you're a victim in this, but you're not perfect. That anger that I had, I began to fall into the same trap that my dad did. Sure, my dad fell into a sexual sin. Well, I fell into an anger sin. And sin is sin. It doesn't matter if you gossip or if you murder somebody, still sin is sin. And I began to learn from that. The therapist told me, he said, you want to be that person that somebody else needs. Well, you can't sympathize with someone that has a broken arm unless you've had a broken arm. So he said, Sarah, one of these days, maybe you're going to be able to reach out to someone that they don't understand why they feel like that, but you've been there. So, you can say, hey, I've been through blah, blah, blah. And guess what? I made it. Sure, I tried to commit suicide, but God stepped in. There was one point in time I had made it up in my mind. I was gonna wait for my husband to go to work, and I had the pills laid out, and I thought, okay, he'll be gone for 8 hours. I'll be gone before that. But I was a wimp, and I didn't want to shoot myself because that was a mess, and I didn't want him to have to clean up. And it's sad that you rationalize that kind of stuff, but you can't rationalize, hey, idiot, you're trying to kill yourself here. But thinking back now, you can think that, but in that moment, you don't think like that. People that are so depressed and so deep they can't see their way out. And I considered myself, I talk to God all the time. Even that day when I had planned on killing myself, it wasn't that I wanted to harm myself. I just did not want to exist. The pain was so bad, I did not want to exist anymore. But that morning, I waited. I kissed Don goodbye, and he left. And I took 4 bottles of pills, everything I could find, down them all. And I laid down. I actually took a shower, cleaned myself up, and I laid down with my Bible, and I thought, okay. I had wrote my husband a letter and decided that was it. And my husband had went to work, and he said it was like 30 minutes later, he said he could not get me off his mind, and God kept speaking to him and telling him to go back home. And Don was, arguing with God, what in the world? I didn't forget anything. Sarah's fine. And he knew I was depressed, but he that was not on his mind at all. And he said he just could not get over it, and he ended up getting to work. And I don't remember if somebody told him, "Are you okay?" And he said, "Oh, I can't get Sarah off my mind." He goes, "Well, maybe you need to go check on her." And so Don did. He rushed back home, and by that time I had started to go out, and Don jumped on the bed and started immediately, and he didn't know nothing. He didn't know what was going on, and started swabbing my throat and made me throw up. And I tried to fight him and everything, and ended up getting me help, and I was fine. But it was if God had not have spoke to him, and this is where our own ignorance and our own, like you said, we get so caught up in our selfishness. I was so selfish, as in, I just wanted to check out. I didn't care who it was going to hurt. I just knew I hurt. So I didn't want to do that sacrifice of, well, maybe I just need to maybe pray more, or I just could not see that way out until later in life. And now it's like that's the first thing I do is immediately, I know now I don't have to do it alone. For years I did it alone. I was afraid what people would think of me. I didn't want them to see weakness. I felt like I dealt with that with my dad and mom, and I was bound and determined I was not going to be that weak, helpless little girl anymore. And I went exact opposite. I went, no, I don't need anybody. instead of saying, hey, I need help. I need people. I need brothers and sisters, you know.
Well, and another thing, First Peter also tells us that, and everybody loves to quote this part of it, and then they kind of leave the rest of it out. But it says that after you have suffered a while, and that's what preachers preach on, but they don't focus on the part where it says He Himself will restore you. And the thing is we get broke down, and He begins to restore us. We begin to see that light, and then we want to go back to the broken down building. So we take God's plans out of His hand and we say, hey, fire your construction crew. I'm doing this from here on. And so then we start rebuilding this process again our own way, and it's not the right way. And God's saying, look, you can build it all the way back up to the top, but I have to break it down again because you missed this part.
Mm-hmm.
And so that whole process of people think that they go back into that God's punishing me. God, this is sin. I'm sinning, so God's punishing me for this activity. And that's not the case. The case is He who started a good work in you will finish it. So God's going to finish this work. And if that makes you 90 years old when He finishes it, that makes you 90 years old. But the problem is we try to get in there and rebuild ourselves,
Exactly.
restore ourselves, and we don't have the ability to restore ourselves. We think we do. So to hear struggle, I know it's not easy to talk about. It's not fun to talk about. I got teary-eyed. I don't know if I got teary-eyed. You got teary-eyed.
I don't even need to be here today. Y'all are just going off. So,
but no, it's not too deep, and we really do appreciate you going this deep with us, because that's why you're here talking like this, because you're willing to go this deep, and that's the thing. Unfortunate for you
that it happened. But because it happened, you can share your story and help somebody else.
Sure.
So that's, not just my philosophy on it too, but my mom's. Unfortunately, she had a lot of the same stuff happen to her. Maybe not as, much. Definitely not the house fires. That's still crazy that you've gone through 4 of them. But her thing is that, if I went through it, it's making me stronger. That way I can help somebody else that's going through it now.
Yeah.
So you get to be that mentor for somebody that's struggling now. So it's kind of crazy to see stuff, and look back at it in full circle and be like, but God still.
Yeah, yeah.
So
my favorite saying is, "This too shall pass. May pass like a kidney stone, but it's gonna pass."
Yeah, I like that one. Tom Hanks was talking about that one time I heard him, and he goes, "This too shall pass." He said, "You just got $1,000 bonus. You feel great. That's going to pass.
Yeah.
You're feeling tired and weak and sick. You're going to hopefully get healed and better. That too is going to pass." Like you just don't think about. You think about it so much in the moment that you realize all the stuff that you've been through is already behind you, and
Yeah.
it's like,
Well, that's the sad part. Is you? It's funny. I've always considered myself. I've had a good relationship with God. He at points in time in my childhood, he was my only friend. That was it, and I didn't even know. I didn't know how to pray. I didn't know. I didn't know anything about that. It was just, I knew God was there because I felt Him. That was just, I felt anger from Dad, or anger from Mom. I felt abused from Dad, and I felt love from God, and that was it. As a kid, kids don't understand stuff like that, but they do. They understand emotions. A baby can't articulate words, but they know emotion, they know tone, they know feeling, and that's the way I felt. I didn't know why I loved God so much. I just knew that He was there for me. When in the moments of abuse, I would go to that place. I wasn't in that abusive place at the moment mentally. I would escape, and there was a picture on my wall, and it was this picture of there was a lake scene and a little boy in a boat. He was fishing, and it was just one of those serene scenes. I went there, and I talked to God. And I know it sounds funny to some people, but that was my escape. And it was always God was my escape. And I believe whenever I become older, I realized what that truly meant. And God really is your escape. He's that cleft in the rock. You know, in the midst of a storm, you can hide in that cleft of that rock and know that, okay, that storm is raging outside. You know, after the first fire, 6 months later, we had a second. You know, you're hiding in that rock. I literally, to go in a little more in depth in that one, that happened at 2 a.m. We heard this big explosion, and mind you, 6 months later, or 6 months earlier, we had our house fire, which was another miracle, and that whole nother story. But our second fire, my husband woke me up, and our house was literally glowing red, and I jump up and panic 2 a.m. and me, like 90% of all Americans, I slept in my birthday suit. So I jump up and run down the hallway thinking our house is on fire, and I have 2 kids. So I'm just like in this panic, 2 o'clock in the morning, you can't really think, and my husband is screaming, he's on fire, he's on fire. And I'm like, who? You know, who's on fire? And he's looking out our back window, and you could see the trailer behind us, and this little boy, he's 2 years old, was running past the door, and his hair was on fire. And immediately, it just panic mode hit in my birthday suit, I ran as fast as I could. I screamed at my husband to get our kids out of there, and I ran in the fire to get them. He got my kids out and got them to safety and away. But it was in that moment of just, all I could say was, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. You know, I couldn't say a big, nice prayer, dear Lord, Heavenly Father, come down and help me. That's all I could say was, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. I probably sound like a Chinese laundromat in there, just, you know. And I ran in there, and I couldn't see anything. If you've ever been in a fire, that is the most eerie feeling you could ever be in. You can't see, you can't hear. It's just a roar of black. If I could ever picture hell, that would be, it is the most disorienting thing ever. As I tried to figure out, you know, I couldn't think, you know, you learn in school, crawl, you know, get down and crawl. I did not remember that. I did not think of that. You know, all I was thinking is, oh my gosh, I can't breathe. It felt like it sucked the air right out of your lungs. But this little boy, all I could get that picture was this little boy on fire in there. And I remember just doing this with my hands out in front of me, trying to, and I'm screaming, but I could feel myself screaming, but you really could not hear yourself scream. And all of a sudden, something ran into me, and he had ran right into me. I just remember grabbing, and I could remember that I had walked straight down the hall, so I backed up, feeling on the wall, which I burned my buttocks really bad in that fire, because that's all I could do, and the whole sides of that trailer was just moving back and forth. And I threw him as hard as I could out that front door. I thought, you know, in my process, I'd rather him be hurt, thrown out, than burned, because I knew that there was 3 other people in there. And I remember at that point in time, I got down on my hands and knees, because I still could not, and I kept yelling. I could hear the little boy cry, but I could not tell which way he was coming from. And I just remember, I thought I was climbing over laundry, and found out later it was the mother. She had passed in the hallway. But I remember finding the second little boy and dragging him out what I thought was clothes, and it was by his hair. And I grabbed him out. Well, by this time, the walls were already collapsing, and I couldn't go back in again. So I got him out, and people from the trailer park had already tried coming running up there, because a lady had picked up the little boy, and I come out. And it was very weird. Although I did singe my backside, my hair was not singed. I did not, and my hair should have been burned. But the night before, I had gooped my hair with conditioner to, you know, give it one of them treatments overnight. And the fire department said that probably helped me not burning because my hair was so thick with this conditioner stuff. But whenever I got outside, you know, the fire department and the police department seemed like they were all there within minutes, you know. Well, birthday suit. So I'm hiding because I can't, it had already caught our house on fire, so couldn't go back in there to get nothing. And all we could do was steal the clothes, or I think it was a sheet or something on the neighbor's clothesline, and wrap up. So we run back out to the car, and we're trying to get the fire out and everything. Well, by that time, I guess it's the fire marshal or whatever, had to come and identify bodies and whatnot, which I had to be sedated because we ended up having to, they placed us, because I was the last person in the fire, and because I had contact with anyone in the fire, they would not let me go back in my house. They wouldn't let me go anywhere. And so for 9 hours, we sat in the rain, standing beside my car with my husband, staring at 2 burned bodies. And let me tell you, that's a sight you will never forget. And it's hard to get out of your memory, even with medicines. That's something that you don't unsee. There are smells that, till this day, that I can, it'll take you places you don't want to go. But throughout that whole, and yes, it did take me almost a year before I could even function right. So don't think that, well, God heals you instantly and God takes everything instantly. No, that's not how healing works sometimes. Sometimes healing is a process. Yes, God heals, and He has healed me instantly before, but in that process, there was a long process. But God did heal that, and I can talk about it, and I don't, sure, I still cringe, and I still, thought processes, I'm still human. But God has allowed me to, I pray for those little boys. I still, till this day, I know where they're at. The grandmother that ended up taking them showed her true colors when the governor actually came to my house and gave me an award for life-saving thing. And it was very nice that they did that, but I did not feel like I had done anything, because my thought process is, what kind of sick, uncaring person would not run in there and get a kid? So, here they're telling, oh, no one would have done that. I'm like, no, if you would have saw what I saw, you would have went in there and did the same thing that I did. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I just, man sometimes takes it out as, well, you've done this great feat, but what does God tell us to do? What would God done? He would have went in there, and as us, like you say, sometimes our pride would like to get in, and mine did for a while there. I thought, wow, I got an award from the governor, and they gave me a Medal of Honor, and I hung that proudly on my wall. And I was like, wait a minute, God was what took me in there.
Yeah, and see, something too is like, whenever it comes to, you talk about seeing the things that you see, the smells and stuff like that, and a lot of people would say, okay, what kind of God would do that? But the thing is, what they don't want to talk about, suicide's at an all-time rate. It's higher than it's ever been. People, instead of going to God like days of old, they're trying. So there's, I'm not saying it's been a whole lot, but there are people who have seen people, young kids, burned in a fire. Instead of going to God and saying, God, hey, look, I know this is something we're going to have to work on. Mm-hmm. This is me and you, but I know you're here with me. You're here talking about it. There are people who, and I hate to get gruesome, who are not living right now because they couldn't handle it because they didn't go to God. Right. So we flash these stories about, your God did this to you. Here's the thing. This happens on a daily. Yeah. This is going to happen on a daily. We don't follow around people and ask them about, what has God done for you. We ask them on TV, what's going on with you. So if you're wondering and you're saying, man, so all of this stuff, and you still are trusting God, and God let this stuff happen to you, here's the thing. You've still got God on your side, and you're still accepting God on your side. That's the difference. The moment somebody like you is to say, God, I've got this, and I'm done, that's whenever we hear the bad stories. We go back to the very, very bad stories. So just that's another thing, because I've thought that same thing myself, man. Why I'm growing closer to God, and sometimes the closer you grow to God, people want you to point out what they see is happening. Man, are you okay? Because like you got a kid on the way, and you're just switching jobs, and you're doing this, and they see what the world sees, and you're like, look, I know this doesn't look good to you, but me and God have got this. Leave us alone.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing that just to see your attitude when you were here before we started rolling, and to see the attitude now, it's the same person. And that's the thing that I love about God. God hasn't made you two separate individuals.
Right.
The one before the podcast, the one during the podcast, and the one after. Your attitude is the same. I've seen you Sunday mornings, um, um, and we're going to go to a little brighter thing. I've seen your wonderful Kansas City Chief wood carving, your wonderful mural. In all seriousness, though, the wonderful mural that you've done in the kids' room back there, um, you're not hiding. And that's the thing. Whenever you fall in these hard times, you can create an alter ego and let that person run your life, or you can go to God and you're letting God run your life. This art, and because the chainsaw art is amazing, and the art that you've drawn back there is amazing. I don't know if I said drawn or drew or whatever, however the correct wording on that is.
Yeah.
Is that something that you used as an outlet, and you thoroughly, that was your thing? Explain to us your love and your passion for art and stuff like that, and what God has done through you through your art.
That absolutely is.
And
Go ahead.
I think that's an aspect to where me and you could bond
Yeah.
over that too, because I'm also, huge into art and stuff like that too. But unfortunately, I don't let mine shine as brightly as yours.
Shame, shame, shame. No.
I know. I need to get
And
back
again,
into
and
it,
again,
but-
give a plug for the company.
Oh yeah.
Oh.
What's the name of the?
Backwoods and bare feet. The reason I am, if you could see me, if this was video, you'd probably laugh, because if I could, I would be barefoot all the time. Like I said, I'm as country fried as chicken and cornbread. When you see me at home, my hair's up in a ponytail. I'm in camo right now, actually. I'm usually barefoot, summer, winter, fall. But I even chainsaw barefoot, and I know OSHA laws and
braver
rules
person than
and
I am.
rules.
Ooh.
Somebody going to call on that one, but yep, I do it. But anyway, and I have had accidents. Yes, a year and a half ago, I about chopped
Ooh.
my arm off, and did a number.
Oh, I don't do. I
I
don't
did
do
a
no.
pictures.
number on that. Oh,
No.
come on.
I don't do pictures. Sorry.
But yeah, anyway, I.
She had that one ready for you, bud.
I did. But yes, I almost severed my arm with the chainsaw, and God saved me from that one too, because it was that, like I said, I've got so many stories. It would take days. God has definitely not gave me a dull life by any means, and He knows that I couldn't have handled a dull one. I like excitement. I'm an adrenaline junkie, and love stuff. I love life. I'm glad that God has allowed me and didn't allow me to just go whenever I thought I should go. But no, back to how I came to the church. It actually started, the whole snowball started rolling when I cut my arm. That was right before we started our church in our home, and then our house fire. And when the house fire happened, that actually about snapped me. Like I said, it was number 4, and I don't know how most people react on number 4, but it took a toll on me, and I took off. I am the most family-oriented person. I have 5 grandchildren, 2 kids, and I talk to them daily. And it was just like, when this fire happened, something in me snapped. I went weeks without talking to people. Anybody knows me, I'll talk to a wall. And I shut down. I could not bounce back. And I think because me and my husband were on our own at that time, and we didn't have a church as in per se, that I could run to my pastor and say, "Oh my God, please pray for me." And I felt like we were alone, and I didn't have that support system that I needed. And if I could advocate anything, find a support system in your church, because there's going to be a time you are going to need it. And that was one of my times. But I took off. I left my husband, not left him as in divorced, but I left. I checked out of reality. I moved in with a cousin down in Cassville. She had an 80-acre horse farm, and I checked out for an entire year. I moved in with her, and I talked to my husband on weekends only. And about 3 months into it, it had gotten to us both so bad. We were misplaced. We were homeless. He was living with my daughter because he lived in Springfield, or he worked in Springfield, and he couldn't come back and forth to me. And it was like I just didn't care anymore. I think that was my problem. I had just gave up. And about 3 months into it, he was going through things as well, and it just got to be, we had a huge argument over something so dumb. We laugh about it now because we're together, and we laugh about it because it's like, wow, the devil set out a mousetrap and we fell into it hook, line, and sinker, and almost died from a little mousetrap. And but I moved down there, and my cousin just allowed me to heal. And I picked my chainsaw up again because I hadn't picked it up in a while because of the accident. And that was another type of PTSD. I could hear a chainsaw and I just cringe. And I was bound and determined. I thought, okay, I can't let this whip me. I am gonna pick this back up. So I would pick it up, and I would literally, I'm not joking or stretching it at all, I would break out into a cold sweat. And I'd be like, my heart would start to pound. I thought, okay, I can't do it. And I did that for probably a month before I finally got the nerve to kick that thing back on and just cut through a small log. And you'd be surprised how much one bad experience, Dr. Phil, I used to be a big Dr. Phil person, and he would tell me, that one moment that you tell a kid you are nothing, he goes, it's going to take 1,000 attaboys to erase that. And we're kind of like that in life. We have that one moment that we remember the negative. We forget all the good stuff that God's given us or God's done for us, but we focus on that one thing. And there was a story I seen on Facebook not too long ago. It said this teacher was writing on the board, and it was an experiment for the students, and she wrote, I think Clayton may have preached on this. He wrote, 9 plus 9 is 8, 1 times 9 is 9, 9 times 2 is 81, 9 times 3 is, he went on down the line and keeps going, and the students start whispering and stuff, and all they could focus on was when he said 9 times 2 is 81, and they couldn't get past that to get to the rest of it, and that's the way we do sometimes as Christians. We get this little hump, or we get this little hiccup, and we get so stuck on it, and it's like, okay, it was just a mistake, just go on, just don't get hung up. But yet we get so hung up, we don't hear all the other stuff, and we don't learn anything from there. But as I was down there at my cousin's, I began to think, okay, my husband had asked me for a divorce, and my world started coming down, and it was like, I don't even care anymore. I don't want to do anything. I was back to that point, and I had forgot about all the stuff that God had done for me. And I had never faced divorce before. We've been married 36 years, and that had never been an issue. We've always, I know everybody fights and has disagreements, but we had never, ever done anything like that. And there was no reason, he didn't cheat on me, I didn't cheat on him. We had a good relationship. We just had a fire. But I say the devil had put a wedge there, and we had allowed that, or he planted that seed, and we were watering it, I guess is what I'm saying. We had allowed that to grow, and Anyway, long story short, I had made it up in my mind. I thought, okay, this isn't going to work. God didn't mean me to be a single person, and God anointed our marriage years ago, and I believe that, and I began to fight, and I would get up every day at 4:30 in the morning, and I took a walk, and I walked way down the back 40, and I would carve, and that became an outlet for me. I would pray, and my anger would come out in these trees, and there's a lot of carvings back there, and I would carve how I felt, and different things that sometimes I would just chop trees, just my anger. But I began to, I have a picture, I wish they could see a picture. I took a walk one time, and it was down an old dry creek bed, and there was this huge root. I mean, it was almost as tall as this room, and to me it was just gorgeous. I mean, sure, I see things that somebody might not see, but it was just absolute. We had had a flood, and it had rolled this tree completely out of the ground and cleaned all the roots off, and it was just like magnificent. I crawled up on it. I hung my phone in a tree because I was by myself. Hung my phone in a tree, put a timer on it, and took a picture of myself in this tree, or in these tree roots. And I just wanted to show my cousin how big and magnificent this tree root. And I was thinking, man, if I could move this thing, what I could carve out of it. And so anyway, I get it back, and I show my cousin, and she was like, oh, okay. And it was like, it almost offended me because she didn't see what I saw. And I went walking the next morning, and that thought process kind of crossed my mind, and God began to speak to me. I'm like that root. I have been tossed by flood, and all them roots, the ugly root, the dirt, mud-covered root, come up. But that water, that God has washed all that gunk out, and those roots have been absolutely just taken out and seen by everybody. And a lot of people see that as, ew, it's just ugly roots. But I've seen these in, you go on YouTube, and you go on, they take these old ugly roots, and they make this masterpiece out of them, and they sell them for thousands of dollars. And I thought, God began to speak to me like that. Some people see your life as this ugly, useless root, and they could see no use out of that at all. But then that one person, God, he sees a masterpiece. He sees what you could be, not just this ugly root, but he sees that, okay, if we carve this off and get that one off, and this a little bit, and polish that up a little bit, you could be this magnificent carving. And God began to speak to me through my carvings, and when I would carve, I prayed 90% of the time I was carving. Matter of fact, I would get so engrossed in my carving, some people would walk up and tap me, and it would just scare me to death because I was totally in the zone, in my carving. But I began to do that, and I can tell in my carving sometimes. If I'm not praying when I'm carving, I can tell. I can tell a big difference in the way it looks. I can tell a difference in, I know it sounds silly to some people, but I really can. And I've told Jamie when I was painting back here, I get in the zone, and it's like, it's a release for me. I don't have to think about problems. I don't have to think about,
it's almost angelic.
yes,
It's
is. It
for
really
I
is.
for me when I get in the zone while I'm doing something creative like art or drawing or painting.
It's like God
It
puts everything back into
yes, yeah.
perspective.
It's it's kind of a not only just a release for your anxiety, pain,
Yeah,
anger, anything like that, but it's a way just to disconnect from everything. And
exactly.
it's crazy how something as simple as painting
Yeah,
can you know be a tool that God uses to better your life.
yeah, yeah. And plus, it's a plus of seeing that, and I know that's a little bit of pride in there, but you can step back and say, wow, I know that was not me.
Right.
I could not
Yeah.
do that on my own at all. But God did that. Look at that.
Right.
Let you, like the thing is we have these things, like that was a natural gift that just came natural to you. And that's what's cool about God is whenever he unlocks those, whenever you're trying to be something that you're not, your body knows it, your spirit knows it. And so whenever those two conflict with each other and you're like, why, how come this isn't like, I don't feel comfortable. And that's one thing that Brooklyn really helped me out with. Brooklyn just, I mean, I love her. So whenever I say this, I don't mean this like she's comfort first and then we work from there. Like we're going out, okay, well I'm going to be comfortable and if it's nice, we're going to find comfort nice, but it is what it is. And like before it's like, no, this is we got to
That's
be
why you got bougie sweats,
yeah,
bro.
we got to yeah. Uh but no, that simple, just that simple, this is something that I like. This is something that me and God get to spend time with. And that's one thing that another thing that's cool about God too is he wants to do something that you like with you.
Yeah.
And so that's fun for him too, is to work with you doing the wood carvings and painting and stuff like that. So is which to you is it the painting that is just kind of like an artistic side note, or is it like you're really into the carving? Like, which was it first? Which came first, the painting or the carving?
The painting came first. I've done painting for years as an outlet, even whenever I was younger. I would just do that. But it's just, I'm, I love anything crafty. And I love new. I love things different. I don't like the same thing all the time. And I think that's why God has allowed me to live the life I have, because I adapt very easy. Um, I've learned to roll with punches, and I've learned that I've never been good at anything, ever. But I'm not afraid to try anything. So that is where I find my peace in just being able to say, I've tried it, or I've did it. You know, I used to, in church when I was a teenager, I was the one that if somebody said, "Oh, I don't want to do that," guess what? I wanted to do that just because I wanted to be that one that no one else was, or that. And I know it was kind of a selfish thing whenever I was a teenager, just to be able to say, "Well, she's not afraid to clean toilets, or she's not afraid to clean that baptistry that no one else wanted."
Yeah.
I just wanted to be able to say, "Well, I'm not, that one. I wanted to be. I'll do whatever," and I'm still that way. I'm very competitive. And I'm the type that if you're going to go a mile, I'm going to try to go 2. And now I'm confessing. But that's just me. I like to do that. I know that I would love to be able to say that's a real spiritual thing for me, but it's not. It's just my flesh sometimes pops out. And I do. I love to hear. I think maybe some of that is out of my childhood. Didn't get a lot of the attaboys, and I like that now. So maybe that's just a part of me. And if I could say that to anybody else, I think that's okay. God gives me an attaboy or attagirl all the time. So I think God is what He needs you to be, and a lot of people don't realize that. I feel bad for people that go to church, and I keep squirreling back. I am squirreling. I never have got to home church. That is where I'm going with this. God got me and my husband back together through prayer. My 4:30 in the morning prayer. I had no idea till later that my husband was doing the same thing. He was praying constantly. I was praying constantly, and my daughter was about to go nuts, so she was praying constantly. She, had never faced the thought process that her mom and dad would be divorced. And I thank my kids so much for my daughter. I love her to death. She is such a little prayer warrior. Oh, I'm so proud of her. I'm proud of both my kids, but I'm very proud of Rebecca, which, by the way, she is in the youth leadership in her church as well. But, what was I saying? Squirrel?
4:30 prayer.
Oh, yes. We were praying together, and God got us back together. Like I said, we went to couples therapy for a little bit, which I would suggest to anyone. And it doesn't matter. Don't let your car break down so bad that you can't get it fixed before it's fixable or unfixable. Yeah, you know what I mean. Anyway, we had got back together, and when we finally moved back, we moved to Republic, actually, closer to our grandkids. And we had began to pray, Lord, what do we need to do? Do we need to start a church? And we didn't feel that. We didn't feel, we would go to different churches, and I can honestly say, we have been to 90% of the churches in Springfield, and could not feel, sure, there's a lot of nice people, there's a lot of good churches, a lot of good people, but we could never connect. And I am the type, not saying that I'm all about feeling or anything like that, but I have to feel it. And if I can't feel it, if I don't gel, I can't, I need my posse, I guess. I need people that I know are going to be in my corner. And, because I know if I'm going to do life with somebody, I got to be able to feel that they are going to feel me. They are going to, not just say the words, but they're going to do what they say. And the moment we walked in the door, we actually brought some friends of ours. They've been raised in church with us as well, and they were dealing with the same thing, not being able to find a truth or a church that preached the whole truth, and not a bunch of ruffle stuff that, just because it's uncomfortable and they don't preach that, or they, I want the whole Bible, whether it's uncomfortable or not. I want it preached to me, and I want someone that's concerned. Well, anyway, we walked in, and I'll let them have their testimony, but our friends Amanda and Mike Trombley, they came with us. We had decided that night that we were all going to home church, I'm like, okay, and they were asking me, they said, well, what do you think about it? Did you look on the website? Because we were big on that, look on the website and see what their worship is, because we've been to some that, oh, dear Lord, you just fall asleep, or woo, they need to learn that it's, a new era here. Come to the era of 2023. But we came in and sat down, and like I said, I'll talk to a wall, so, which of course you could tell by the guys, they haven't got much word in edgewise here in this podcast. But we came in, and it was just, I felt it right off. I could feel, from the moment we walked through the door, I think probably 10 people hugged me. I am a hugger. And I have to really watch myself, because not everybody's a hugger. But at home church, I truly felt home. The minute I walked through the door, I felt home. Well, when we left, the pastor came over and we talked, and he hugged me. And people do not realize what kind of impact that had on me. I know that sounds silly to some, but for years, I have been treated, I held back my testimony because I was afraid how people would treat me. When you find out somebody was sexually abused, it's like, how do I treat her? Do I, I don't want her to take this wrong. I don't, so they walk on eggshells around you, and you don't realize how uncomfortable that makes them feel. It's like that condemnation comes all back again, and it's like you feel dirty, and you didn't do anything, but yet you feel like you're still being punished for being in the situation you were in that you could not help. But it was like, and I knew he knew, because I had texted him beforehand, because I'm a blunt man now. I am just like, I throw it out there. I want to see what the reaction is. I was abused as a child. And you look right at him like, okay, how are you going to take this? And he didn't flinch. That meant the world to me, because that was like, okay, I know God doesn't flinch. So I saw a type of shadow of God in him, because he didn't flinch. He wasn't afraid to hug me and tell me, hey, I love you. I'm glad you're here. And I truly felt that. And it overflowed on the people. It was just, and then the second service came, and it was like he preached on everybody was equal. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. I felt like I'd never heard the Bible before. I've never heard people preach like this before. Wait a minute. You are saying that I am on the same level as your deacons. And we used to call them in our old church, we called them the bigwigs. You know, they didn't talk to you, and we would go out to eat at Shoney's. That tells my age right there, because they don't even have Shoney's around here no more. But, you know, we would go out to Shoney's, and the bigwigs or whatever would eat at a certain table, and then everybody else ate somewhere else. But, you know, you didn't associate. And it was like, this church, everybody loves everybody. And I know for a fact, you know, if I have a problem, everybody, they care. They genuinely care. I've got a lot of health issues, and I have had people come to me and offer, you know, do you want me to bring you dinner? And I'm like, what? They do that? You know, and home church is just, the name says it all. You feel at home, and that's truly what church should be. God is, you know, we come here to learn about God, but we are truly doing life with these people. And if you can't feel at home enough to share, like I would have never shared, like I've never done this, so you're getting the first exclusive on this. I've never shared like this ever, and I feel comfortable with you guys. You know, I'm sitting here with two brothers that I dearly love, and I don't even know you all yet as much as I would like to, but I can truly say I feel family with you guys, and I love that. And that's, you know, that's healing for a lot of people, and people don't realize there are so many people. I'm like an iceberg. You see the tip, but there's so much going on in there. It's just, some people can handle that, some people can't. And I am a certain flavor. You know, some people just, ugh. Not everybody likes pickles and peanut butter. I love them. But, you know,
That's a weird combination.
Like,
that's a weird combination.
It is a weird combination, but it is a delicatessen in some countries.
It's going to be a southern thing that I haven't tapped into yet.
Oh, love it. Garlic on my watermelon, too.
And that's that. Another thing, going back to just talking about Clayton and somebody who practices what you preach, and this is more of a testimony for. I know Clayton doesn't like to take praise, and he doesn't like to do any of that stuff. But Clayton just
anything, that is a big attribute that I love about him and
Yep.
Jamie.
And the thing that I loved was when you have somebody that tells you about Jesus and how he should be, and then you see him act a different way, that's one thing. But I don't know exactly how long ago it was, but I was going through some problems myself, and they had to do with sexual sins. And so I called Clayton up, and I was like, hey, man, it's on my heart. I got to let you know I don't feel right being a youth pastor and this going on. And he goes, I want to pray with you right now. And he goes, I love you, brother. I don't hold it against you. And you have to realize that it's already been forgiven. You got to move about your way. And he was like, I'll see you Wednesday. He talked to me Wednesday like nothing happened. And to me, that, like you said, you know, I know Clayton doesn't like praise Clayton and or Jamie, but they practice what they preach.
Yeah.
They try.
That's a true shepherd.
The true shepherd, and they try their absolute hardest, and they do a very good job of every piece of them trying to project the image of Christ. And I know, you know, it's like and the thing is we talk about this and we don't remind everybody. Clayton will tell you the same. He's human. He's like us. But the thing is if you have somebody who you tell them, hey, this is what I've got going on, and he says, oh,
Yeah.
okay, what do you need prayer? Is that what you need? There wasn't a scolding. There wasn't a, oh, you disgusting.
Yeah.
Oh, blah, 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 blah. It was, hey, man, I'll see you Wednesday. All right. And that's what I love. And the fact that you made the comment about how, you know, you don't really know us. We haven't really talked a whole lot. But the thing is we have the opportunity to. So now we've opened up the door, and now we know, okay, Sarah's good to talk with it. We're good. So you know now, that's what another, I hate being a dead horse, but that's what we love about the podcast is now hopefully.
No, shamelessly plug it, dude. Shamelessly.
But that's
I'm all about the podcast.
and that's what's great is having the people who maybe you don't know, maybe they are new, maybe they are somebody who's been here a hot minute and they don't realize the what happens behind the scenes. And a lot of stuff can go on here at church, but whenever you go home, what happens at home? That's when the devil's going to attack you. And I'm not saying he won't attack you here. I mean, he tries what he can do, and that's the thing. But whenever you're away from here, away from people, away from each other, he likes to get you when you're alone, and he likes to get you whenever you're weak. So that's why it's good to have these relationships, is so that way, when something's going on, I could call Sarah up and say, "Hey, Sarah, this is what I've got going on. Nobody else is answering their phone. You mind praying for me?" And that's the thing. That's what's great about these families. And hopefully now, I know me much more. It's like I told you before. I'm quiet at first because I have to get to know people. Um,
Then
But-
good luck getting him to shut up.
yeah,
Well, it might be a battle between me and him.
but so we've gone through a lot of stuff. We've gone through the youth. We've gone through sort of the middle stages of life, and then where you're at now with home church. And the end all be all is obviously you would like the best. We want to keep you here at home church. We want to keep you here. You made I don't mean to pry, and this isn't here to. But is I know you said for right now you're not feeling that at all. Your guys' calling. You were talking earlier about serving here at the church, and you made the comment about I just want to serve. Like you have a servant's heart. You're here to do whatever. The end all be all here at home church. What areas what areas interest you in serving? Though I know there's a lot that you could say, yeah, I just want to do whatever. But is there one or two in mind that you're like, man, these really seem kind of interesting here?
I would have to say youth would be my heart because of my youth. Um, my youth was such a void that I can't express how much I longed for someone just to be there, to see what others didn't see, to not just ignore because I'm a teen. Don't ignore my actions and say, well, she's just acting out because she's a teen. Maybe there's something lying there. Maybe they're screaming something that others can't hear, because I did that. I did that as a kid. I screamed and I wanted people to see my hurt, but I didn't want to tell them I'm hurting. It's sad. After my dad was arrested, I actually had a counselor from my school come to me, and he had met me I think we were at a fair, and he looked at me and he goes, "I am so sorry." He said, I heard about your dad, and I was immediately taken back, like, oh gosh, I don't want to be reminded of that. And he goes, "I want you to forgive me." He said, "For years I watched you walk the halls," and he said, "I knew something was going on." And immediately anger popped up, and I was like, "You knew, and yet you did nothing." And he was a counselor, and I carried that, and that was in part of my anger issue days. But I carried that with me, thinking, you knew, you could have done something, but you didn't, because you just didn't know what to do, or you just it was uncomfortable. And I thought of that for years. I thought, I don't want to be that way. If I see something, I want to have the guts enough to say, if nothing else, just walk up to a kid or a teenager and say, "Are you okay?" And I want them to be familiar with me enough to be able to say, "You know what, I trust her. I know she knows where I've been, even though I haven't said it out loud, or if I haven't found the courage to come out with that yet." I want them to be able to feel that is safe with me. I want to be able to to let them know, uh, even if it is like sharing my story on a podcast, maybe that they would hear that. Maybe someone, even an adult, has been out there and has suffered with that memory of something that happened as a kid. And I know how hung up you can get on that. How you feel like, okay, I love God, and that used to be a big sword in my side. Was people would tell me, "Oh, just pray about it." I know that. Yeah, I know I needed to pray about it. But how about you pray with me? Or how about you carry that burden with me? How about you try to understand that with me? Not just, maybe God is allowing me to go through this to get you on your knees. Maybe this trial that I've been going through is for someone around me to stop and say, "Wow, wait a minute. Maybe I need to be my brother's keeper. Maybe I need to get on my knees and pray for her until God moves." They always want to place it on the person that is going through that, which it affects everyone around. So, and if we are truly doing life with other people, I've always believed that, we are responsible for our circle. And what I mean by our circle is those who you're around, who you do life with, your coworkers and people you go to school with or people you're in church with. You need to know them. Not that you need to be nosy and know every, if they fart, what it smells like. I'm not saying that. But, you need to know that's, hey, Nathan ain't acting right today. Is he going through something? Just, he hasn't said anything, but I noticed his countenance is down. Or Zach he must be going through something good. He's awful bubbly. Know those people, know their actions, and you can tell. If someone would have just took that extra time, I never, ever, in my whole childhood, I never had anyone to do that. Never had anyone to ask me, well, other than my mother, but that was right before she hit. So, I mean, it was kind of and just not to throw, I'm not throwing my mother under the bus by any means. Later on in life, I found out she was abused far beyond what I was ever abused. So, I mean, it's a chain effect, and that chain has to be broken. And I thank God, I pray that it was broken with me. I don't know of any after me. I know it broke on my end, so there was no abuse after that. I've never hit my kids, or matter of fact, that probably affected me too much. Probably should have hit them a little more. Just kidding. but no, it affects your life. It affects the way you have relationships, and it affects uh, just your whole outlook on life. So, if anything, to answer your question again after that whole squirrel route, uh, I would say youth to young youth, just to not to. I don't want to teach. I don't want to preach to them, or I just want to be there. I just want to. If I could catch one, just one, to about a month ago, I think it was. This friend of mine, I'm not going to say a name, but this friend of mine called me, and she, like I said, I've known her since I was a kid, and she knew my situation. But she called me crying, and she was very suicidal. And it was just immediately, she didn't say it right off, but I was quickened. My spirit was quickened. And I immediately, while I was on the phone with her, I began to pray. And it was like, okay, Lord, I can feel that. I know that spirit. And I began to pray and talk with her and everything. And she broke down and she began to cry. And I told her, I said, you know what? You remember when I was here. And you remember we talked. And you remember how I told you I felt. And she began to tell me, she said, I feel that way. I just don't want to exist anymore. And long story short, I'm texting Jamie on the other line. As I'm talking to her, I'm texting Jamie, please pray right now. I've got my friend on here, and I began to put it out, and she said she was going to put it on the prayer list. And I talked to this friend for 2.5 hours, and it was like God moved in, and she began to cry on the phone, and we prayed together, and it was like a long time. And I talked her into letting me call a hotline for her, because she's out of state, and I couldn't just run over there, else I would have been on her front doorstep, you know. But long story short, she got help, and come to find out, she had been sitting there with a gun in her lap, and she was ready to end it. She just wanted someone to know what her deal was, and she said that she had prayed that, you know, God, if no one says anything to me, I'm just going to go. And it was like, I knew, and I told Jamie, I called her back or text her back, and I'm like, oh my God, I know God moved. Because, you know, yeah, sure, they had to come and they had to get her, and you know, some people say, well, it wasn't just a miracle, you know, that she didn't kill herself, and God, that was a miracle. It was a miracle that she's still here, because I know that girl. I know she would have done it. God stepped in. And God sometimes, he's just waiting on us to, okay, you know, maybe God knew that I just needed to hit my knees a little harder that day. Or maybe he needed somebody stirred. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe we'll get to heaven someday and figure that out. But I don't know why God allows these things to happen, but he does.
I've noticed too, like, I am a, if you explain to me something, I want the plain cut and simple version. If it needs done, you got to simmer this and this and this. So what do you need done? You need that cooked? Okay, I'll cook it for you. And I always thought, okay, God is this God of brilliance, which he is. And so he's going to talk to me elegantly. And so I would, you know, like I'm waiting. I'm like, okay, God, is this something that I need to wait on? Yes. Yes, I need to go ahead and move right now. Okay, that was what God. No, he said, yes, you need to quit. Yes, it's simple. Yes and no. So you got to realize too that God knows who you are. It's not like God's not going to tend to the fake you. God's not going to tend to the you that is of this world. He's going to tend to his child, and so he's going to speak to you and treat you in ways that is going to move you. So sometimes it's just to see people smile when they talk about the shell of their old self. It just, that's what I love the most, is whenever you hear people talk about the shell of their old self and they can acknowledge it as that. It's not who they currently are. It's not, I am this and this and this. That's who you were, and that's who's dead and gone. And the things that still happen, I wish I could sit here and tell every single person what they need to do to fix their problem and how to fix it, and a self-help book. And I wish that's what I do. I wish this podcast was that. But the thing is we have to learn these things, and the only way you learn these things is by going through these things and actually doing it. You don't pass a test by not studying. You have to go through it and you have to learn it. So to see and hear the stories of where somebody starts off and where somebody is currently at, and knowing that there's still more of your story to go. The grandkids, that's what really I think it's all about, is realizing not to be jealous or aggravated at what somebody is and where they've come out from, but to see God can do that. It's not the fact that you tithed every day correctly. Your prayers were 4 minutes exactly. Your prayers were to a man that you felt were going to answer them, and that's the difference. So I do really want to ask another thing, though, for those who would like to know, what are, besides just like chainsaw and painting, what are some other things that interest you? Like, what are some things that maybe you and your husband enjoy? What is your, how about this one? We'll go into this one. Describe your husband a little bit for those that don't know.
Well, he works at Aspen Dental. He's been a dental lab tech 90% of his life. He owned his own business for a while, and I should say I didn't do it, hearing aids. So he switched body parts and went from teeth to ears. But now he's back in dentures, and he works for Aspen Dental. He's been there at the new one for like 6 or 7 years, something like that. Other than that, he worked at Mid-America Dental Clinic for 20-some years, and all about teeth. But as far as he is a godsend. He had to be. He married me. He must have prayed for patience, because he got me. He is angelic because he puts up with me. And I'm not saying that lightly. I mean that to be able to just, and I know I'm a lot. I'm a big mouthful, a lot. And he is just the most, and I'm not trying to boost him up or, but I can't say enough about him. He's my rock. He's been there through thick and thin with me. I mean, well, when he married me, you know, it's kind of funny. Can I tell how we met? So I had just started, or my parents had just started this UPC church, or started at a UPC church, and he was Nazarene, and somebody had invited him to our church revival, and I was a teenager, you know, awkward and all that, and just goofy. Well, in our church, they were all girls. There was no boys, and I was a teenager. So when a boy come, it was like fresh meat. So we see my husband and his brother pull up in this white Firebird with T-tops, a black bra, and it was just all decked out with chrome and me.
Hide your kids, hide your wife. The
Yeah,
boys are back in
man,
town.
Well, I called dibs, and that was the first thing out of my mouth.
Now, what was the hairstyle back then? I got to know what the hairstyle
Well,
was. Driving a car like that, I got to hear the hairstyle.
His hairstyle or mine?
His. We'll go with yours next, but I need to know his.
Gosh, to think about it now, it's hysterical because he was big into Don Johnson. So the silk pants, leather tie. Oh, I've got a picture somewhere. Yeah, it was
Awesome!
funny. But yeah, he wore a hat like Don Johnson. He had the beard and the goatee thing going on, and I told my friend, which was the pastor's daughter, I told her whenever they pulled up, they had tinted windows, so you couldn't see who the driver was or anything. I just laughed and I said, "Oh, I get the driver." And you could tell there was two in the car, so we're assuming there was two. And she's like, "Okay, I'll take the passenger," you know. And we laughed. Well, whenever they get out, they come in, and of course we're pretending like we weren't looking out the window. So we run in the sanctuary, and church is about ready to start anyway. So I go and I sit down, and him and his brother comes in, and they sat down, and I'm eyeballing, you know, but I don't want him to know that I'm eyeballing, so I kind of keep my eyes forward, and when it was prayer time, I gawked at him. So anyway, second service rolls around, and I always sat toward the back, and so I was sitting about 3 rows from the very back, and when he came in, he of course didn't have a hat on or anything, and he looked a lot like my brother, my older brother. My brother was always late for church, and me and my brother were very close, and you know, kids, you know, always making faces. Well, when Don walked in, I thought he was my brother, so I turned and I looked at him, and I just stuck my tongue out and made this god-awful face, just, you know, like you would a brother. Well, it embarrassed me because he grinned and winked at me. Well, it embarrassed me, so I flipped my head back around, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh," you know. He looked at me, and so then he sits on the opposite end of the pew, and as a dumb kid, teenager, I'm like, "Oh, how dare you?" You know, I felt like he was making fun of me because he winked at me and he smiled. And I was like, "Oh my God," you know, then I'm just totally embarrassed. So I waited till they prayed and everybody bowed their head, and I crawled over the pew and left the sanctuary and went and hid in the bathroom. So I didn't want nothing to do with him immediately. You know, talk about a fickle teenager. Did not want anything to do with him. So I had no idea that he's waiting outside the bathroom for me to come out. So I wait till, I mean, like 20 minutes, and everybody was almost gone from the church. And I come out, and there he is. And I'm like, you know, I was like, "Oh my gosh." So he walks over to me, and I tried to get around him, and he's like, "Hey," he said, "you know, my name's Don Converse. What's yours?" And I'm, you know, like I said, as a dumb, giddy teenager, I'm like, "Sarah." And I just try to push my way on around him. And he's like, "Well, hey, I wanted to ask you a question." He's like, do you like baseball? And I'm like, no. I tried to walk around him again. And like I said, as in this point, it wasn't that I didn't like him because I really thought he was hot, and I really liked him. But I had him being embarrassed. You know, he bruised my ego just by winking at me, and so I was just too embarrassed. And so anyway, he asked me. He's like, "Well, would you like to go see me play baseball? I play ball for a team. I forgot. I don't even remember what he said." And I was like, my mom won't let me. And I just walked on by. Well, I'm thinking, okay, I got out of that one, which I think back now, that was so stupid of me because I really wanted to talk to him, but I just didn't. So I go on outside, and my mom is still in the church. And I'm like, oh my gosh, the car's locked. I'm locked out. I'm standing out here looking like an idiot because I know he's going to come back out in a minute, you know, and I'm just standing there acting like I had to go. And so he comes out, and he's like, oh, by the way, I talked to your mom, and she said it was okay.
Legend.
And I'm like, oh my God. And he goes, I'll pick you up tomorrow night at 7. And I'm like, oh my God, what do I do? So I'm like, okay. And so he shows up. We meet at the church, and he shows up and he picks me up, and I'm thinking, okay, I do like him, and just, go with it. So he treats me like a queen. I mean, I am eating this up, and I am just dirt poor. Our family was so poor. There were 6 of us kids. We had 2 bedrooms, and one of them was our parents, if that tells you anything.
Wow.
So there were 6 of us in one room. I never owned my own bed until 3 months before I got married. That's a funny story too, but always had to sleep with whoever would let me. As my brothers and sisters. I usually stuck with my brother. He was my best friend, which I lost him about 3 or 4 years ago. But anyway, Dawn treated me like a queen, and we dated. I believe it was right at 2 months, something like that. And they used to have this store called Service Merchandise. This is where Hobby Lobby used to be. And he took me. We were going to Firefall, the 4th of July thing. And he comes in there, and he's like, hey, he goes, I need to stop in here real quick and pay on a payment of something, I remember. And so we go in there, and like I said, I'm Pentecostal. United Pentecostals don't wear jewelry. They don't cut their hair, don't wear makeup, nothing like that. So anyway, but I was always, before I got in there, I was big into jewelry. So I was fascinated at jewelry and stuff. So whenever we came in, he kind of left me, and which was odd for me. He's like, hey, if you want to wait right there for a minute, I'll be right back. Well, I'd never been in that store before. Like I said, I was a poor kid. We did not buy new things. We did not go to the mall. We didn't do that kind of stuff. Our moment of excitement was once a month we got food stamps, and we got to go to Aldi's. So that was the highlight of our month. But so anyway, I'm just oogling over all this jewelry. It was like a kid in a candy store. I'm looking. Well, this lady leans over to me that works there, and she's like, you have beautiful hands. And I'm thinking, oh, wow, And she's like, would you like to model some of our jewelry? She goes, I'll give you a gift certificate. And I'm like, seriously? So she's like, yeah. So she showed me, took me this one section, and she's like, if you could pick out any ring out of this area right here, which one would it be? So I'm looking, and I found this beautiful marquee diamond, and I picked it out, and she's like, okay. And she goes, that's your size. And so I put it on, and she put it on this black velvet, and she acted like she was taking a picture. I noticed that I didn't think but I thought, okay, this is just a sales pitch. She's trying to get me to buy something. And so anyway, about this time, Don walks up. And he's like, oh, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, I'm trying to explain to him. And so she just reaches over, and she hands him this paper. And she's like, here you go. This is a gift certificate, for helping us out. So I'm thinking, it doesn't sound abnormal or too stretched. So I'm thinking, okay. So anyway, she puts the ring back, and he's like, I hate to do this to you, but I'm going to have to run back over here. And I don't remember what he told me. He was doing something. But he's like, give me just a few more minutes. I'm like, okay. So I go over, and I'm looking at some piano keyboards and stuff. And before long, he comes back again. He goes, okay, you ready to go? Okay. So we go out, and he opened the door like he always did, and whenever I went to sit down in the seat, there's a ring box in the seat. I'm like, oh. So I just pick it up, and he was big into jewelry, by the way. So I'm assuming this is something he's bought for himself. So anyway, I put
Oh, hold on. Hey,
snap.
hey, we got the Don Johnson. So what jewelry are we toting on? What's he wearing?
Oh.
What if you're going? So let's just say he's taking you out. He just got paid. He's feeling fresh. What jewelry?
What's he packing?
What gems is he wearing?
He had a chain with like a kokaya, I think it's like Hawaiian, like these beads and shells.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, he had that. He wore a bracelet. He always had some, and he still has a fetish for watches. He owns more watches than Walmart, by the way. I say that again, Dawn. But anyway, he always had a real nice, gaudy watch. And tie clips were really big back then. That tells our age. But anyway, they had diamond tie clips. He had all kinds of crazy tie clips. And was those thingies that they put on the
Cuffs?
sleeve.
Oh, yeah.
They did those too. But anyway, it depended. He had more than I ever dreamed of having. But anyway, I get in and I just move the box to the middle console, and he gets in the car and he's looking at me. He goes, well, aren't you going to open it? And I'm like, oh, okay. So I open it, and it's that ring that I picked. I'm like, what's this? And he's like, do you like it? I'm like, yeah. And he goes, well, here, let's put it on. So he puts it on, and he puts it on this finger, and I'm like, oh, and he leans over and he kisses me, and I'm like, oh. And I'm thinking in my head, what just happened here? Is he asking me? Is he just giving it to me? What just happened? So anyway, and I'm looking at it thinking, wow, what happened? So we go to Firefall. We go home. We get out at my house. He kisses me goodnight, and he tells me he'll pick me up in the morning. And he leaves.
Wait. Homeboy didn't elaborate on anything?
Not a word.
Oh.
So I go in. Well, my mom, that's the first thing she sees is, oh my gosh, tell me everything. I'm like, I wish somebody would tell me what happened because I have no clue. She's like, did he ask you? I'm like, no. Well, why did he give you a ring? I'm like, I don't know. So I tell her the story, and she's like, oh, I bet he was asking. I bet you just checked out and you didn't realize. I'm like, no, he did not ask. I think I would realize if he asked me. So anyway, I'm just playing it cool. So the next day, he comes and picks me up for church, and then we were supposed to go to his parents after church, like we did all the time, and go for dinner or lunch. And so anyway, we go to church. Well, I don't wear the ring to church because they don't believe in rings and stuff. So I just kind of hid it. And I told him, because he asked me immediately, where's your ring? And I said, well, they don't believe in that kind of stuff. So I just put it in my purse. He's like, oh, okay. So as soon as church is over, I get back in the car. I put the ring back on. And we go to his house. Well, he never says anything anymore about it. He just tells me it looks good on my hand. And so anyway, we go in his parents' house, and at first I was really uncomfortable around his parents because they were wealthy, or not, for me they were like rich, but of course I had my clothes in a box, so it didn't have to be too much to be rich. But anyway, I walked in the door, and his family just surrounded me. Oh, let me see the ring, and I'm like, okay, so I'm showing it, and they're just so excited and everything. And then his mom whips out this book. And she's like, oh, we've been looking through some things. Which announcement would you like? And I'm like, announcement? It's wedding announcements. So we're looking through wedding announcements. And then she whips out wedding napkins and stuff. And I'm thinking, oh my God, so that was a proposal. So I'm embarrassed because I'm like, I really didn't know, but I guess he assumed the sale. So we go along with it. 30 days later, we're married. Yeah.
Wow.
years later, we joked about it one time. We were at a Valentine's banquet at our church, and they were going around the room, and they said, okay, we're going to point at somebody, and you're going to tell your most romantic story, and on the proposal and all this, and I'm looking like, yeah, this is going to be rich. So I volunteered for that one, and I'm like, tell us, Don, how did you propose? And those were his exact words. He's like, I assumed the sale. So there's a lesson in that, I guess. His faith got him married. But I guess he should have checked the fine print on me. Because he got what he got. But yeah, 36 years later, we'll be 37 in October. He assumed that sale. So yeah, that's how we met.
And so, when was your first, like, when was your first? It seemed like it all happened so fast. Like, was there a moment whenever you were like, this is the obviously, this is the one partially, but was it just moving so fast at that time that?
No, honestly, I mean, my embarrassment at first got me, and it was a lot of pride there. And he didn't even mean it. But on our wedding day, his dad came to me and gave me this letter that he had wrote, and it was the very first night of the revival. And he had wrote to his dad, and he said, hey, Dad, just wanted to let you know. And later on I found out that he had got back from the revival at like 11:30 at night, and it was like 1 o'clock in the morning before he got home. So he wrote this note to his dad and left it on his dad's Bible for him to read the next day when he went to work. And he said, hey, Dad, just wanted you to know that church was awesome tonight. And by the way, I met my future wife. And he wrote, she was wearing a god-awful yellow polka-dotted dress. It was lemon yellow with bright white polka dots the size of quarters and puffy sleeves. Hideous! Absolutely hideous. And that's what it looked like. And he described what I looked like and where I sat in church. And he said, don't know how long it'll be, but I'm going to marry her. So he knew right off, and he told me, he said, I don't know what it was, but he said, from the first time you stuck out your tongue, he knew I was his. And it was funny because about the second date, I knew. I just knew. I had never been in love. I had had boyfriends, if you want to call it that, at 15 years old. But he was my first, he's my last, and he'll be my forever.
So now, not trying to dive back into it, but a little bit, his family seemed like they were very welcoming of you.
Yeah.
Was that something you needed in that time? Was a family, or were your brothers and stuff enough? Was that something that brought comfort to you? Because I know that there were times where relationships that I was in, when I was distant from my mother and father, I had my girlfriend's father, who was technically my boss, but me and my father weren't real close, and I needed something because I was running wild and free at that time. He kept rain on me, but that was more of like a father type figure, I guess. But I needed that from it. Did his family help bring that family to you, or was it just?
I would like to say yes, but no. It was a bad situation in that sense. Now, let me put this in there before I finish saying what I'm going to say. We have a great relationship now. Me and his mother are very close. I love her dearly. And I don't think she would mind me saying this because she has come to God since then. But when me and Don met, he was having a relationship at the time with the mayor's daughter. And money was an issue. And when I was found out that I was just a poor nobody, I was not accepted at all. To the point, and like I said, I don't want to say this to hurt anyone at all. And I think she would agree that she knows that, what went on was wrong, and she has totally made a 180. So just to clarify that, and I'm not going to say any names just in case, but she had, when I found out I was pregnant, I was about 4 or 5 months along, and before we told anybody, my family was not close, and it was just a bad situation for. Uh, I wanted a baby because I wanted somebody to love me. So it was that kind of situation, and God knew that I wasn't ready for that. But anyway, I'll just say a fight ensued, and I was beat up, and I lost the child. So it was not a good circumstance in that situation. When I say I had God and Dawn, that's not an exaggeration. That was literally all I had for a while. And my brothers, I love my brothers to death. Um, like I said, I lost and he was my best friend. I lost him a few years ago to alcohol. He dealt with a lot too, and a lot of people. I really I have a heart for addicts and stuff like that because I know I can understand that. I've been there. You know, when you reach a point that you feel like you have to uh, escape yourself, I guess, escape the memories, escape the feelings that you feel. Unless you know God like like I know Him now, you you can't find that hope, you know, and to be able to find somebody that can help you find that hope or lead you to that hope, then I really I pity those people. You know, I pity people that don't go to church because I don't know. You know, the old saying is, I need Jesus. I need Jesus in my life just to go to Walmart. You know, if you've been to Walmart lately, you know what I mean. But
But the thing with addiction is you're going to something. So the addiction starts out as maybe it starts out with friends. Maybe it is drinking. And so it starts out with friends. And so you're like, no, I'm not dependent on it because I'm with friends, you know. But the thing is, you're depending on the alcohol and your friends are just there.
yeah,
So, like, you know, abuse, I mean, as far as substance abuse, alcohol was in mine. Um, but just as far as addiction goes, it's something that you feel like, hey, I'm not hurting anybody because it's just me, myself. I'm living my own thing, doing my own thing. It's not a problem, and that's the problem. You isolate yourself.
hmm,
And it's like you said, you feel bad for people who are in an addiction because what happens is they get that little bit of peace
hmm,
and then they look for it again and they
shallow.
find it where?
Yeah,
They don't swim very deep to find that peace because that everlasting strength of the Lord's not there. So
yeah.
they're
And
trying
it's
to
a
find
constant
it.
search for
Yeah.
peace because you know you start out just that little bit. And mine, in this the sense, mine was hidden. I didn't want anyone to know. You know, it was. I would drink only when I was alone. I would drink all day, and then you know my husband never knew until the day he found out. And you know, he was noticing differences, but until he found my secret stash and all my empty bottles and all that, and then realized I couldn't stop, then it was you know, like being married to a stranger. But yet he didn't at that point in time he didn't understand what I was what kind of demons I was facing, I guess, is what I'm saying. And until I realized that I needed more than just myself, I could not do this myself, and I felt like I always felt like I was a burden to my husband, and I did not want to tell him. You know, I was terrified. I didn't tell him. He knew that. You know, there was abuse. He knew because I mean, couldn't get around it. It was all over the news and newspapers and you know you couldn't get around not knowing, but yet he chose not to read a lot of the stuff, and because he didn't want to, he wanted me to be able to feel comfortable enough to, I'll tell him when I'm comfortable, and that didn't happen until years later during therapy. But he was very gracious with me and stuff like that. But um, he I can't even describe the I would try to medicate myself to to put on a fake face, fake smile, because I wanted to cry all the time. You know, I laugh all the time, and sometimes I get a nervous laugh because it's either laugh or cry, you know, and I would rather laugh than cry. But I've been told, oh, you're so funny and you're such a happy person, but it's sometimes you can fake yourself out. Sometimes you can, you know, if you see somebody, you know how it is. If you've been around somebody, oh, it's gloom and doom. After a while, you get to feeling that way. It's that way with yourself. You know, if you're constantly thinking depressive, negative thoughts, you're gonna be depressed. You're gonna be negative. And you know, you can get bitter or better, and I've chose to get better. I try to laugh when you feel like crying. Laugh, get it out there, and okay, it's not that bad. You're not gonna die, and if you do, where are you gonna go? So it's a good thing. Win-win.
Um, what do we got?
Just keep going, dude.
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
Don't worry about it.
I didn't know. I didn't know if you had something to say or not.
No.
Oh, okay.
I got a good way to close, but I mean, if you want to keep talking, go for it. So
Yeah,
I don't know what you guys have planned.
Day, so,
So I mean, it's whatever you guys want to do. So.
Well, how long is it running?
We're coming up on 2 hours already.
Oh
So
my gosh.
yeah.
Okay.
Close now.
We're at 2:01. So I didn't know if you wanted to break the record or if you want to keep going.
We'll go ahead and we'll taper it off here. 2 hours. It's no. Well, the last one that went 2 hours, we stopped and we had an intermission, so that way we could kind of break it up.
Yeah.
So
I mean, if you want to.
You can edit this, right?
no, we just posted how
Yeah,
it
we
is.
just posted.
Oh, get out.
Yeah, Callista, shout out to her, hasn't started yet because for some reason we can't log on to our YouTube page other than here at church.
Huh.
So we'll have to figure that out and hopefully get JB to help us figure that out. But yeah, so she hasn't been able to edit our YouTube page and make it look cool yet or any of that fun stuff.
But I wouldn't want it. I mean, like I obviously, polish the edges a little bit. But as far as like, the pauses and stuff like it's,
oh yeah, no.
you just the stories and stuff. There's none that we want to cut out. There's none. This is just us talking, and I would stay here for another hour. But I know that there gets to a point where people are like a 2-hour podcast.
My goodness. Turn me off in 5 minutes.
But we have covered just a lot of stuff, and it doesn't seem like it's been 2 hours because it's been a lot of fun. Whenever you get to hear somebody's story and they get to tell you their story, you can do one of two things. You can try to pick pieces out of it that you can relate to, or you can sit and listen. So I try to sit and listen, and if I ever feel like you're boring me or something like that, I just try to really get in depth. I'm not. I'm not. I don't ever want anybody to think that I'm bored with them. I sit and listen, and it's a story that you can. It's almost. And I'm not being funny or smart aleck. You could make a movie off of that, and you would have people in tears. You would. It's not a joke. It's not being funny. And the fact that the Lord has blessed, I don't know how Zach feels. I would say the same. The Lord has blessed me enough to be in the presence of somebody that's gone through that and said, "Not today, Satan." Shout out James Automotive. That's what we've got on our board. Boom, pop, boom. But to say, "Not today, Satan," and to be here with a smile and to be here and tell your testimony. And to say, you know what, I've had fun with Jesus and stuff, but he's put me through too much. You keep stepping forward, and it seems like every path that you've said, "Not today, Satan," you've gotten over that hurdle. There was the one that you talked about, the devil tried to put a wedge in your marriage. And it's something, like you said, as simple as just giving that doorway just a little bit. It's like a pushy salesman. If you leave a crack in the door and back up, he's going to try to find a way in. And if you let him in, he's going to make himself extremely comfortable. And fortunately, you were able to spearhead that, and there was no divorce. You're better for it now. These are the stories that we like. And I don't say like them as in it's good content and we're going to get reviews, because it's not about the reviews. Stuff like that is good because people can realize they may not have gone through, I haven't gone through a quarter of what you've gone through in my life. My things that I've gone through have been different. The thing is God has put me in a position where things that you've gone through, I may not have made it to the end. I think for somebody to say to compliment, not compliment, but to contemplate suicide, you're not a Christian if you do that. No, that's the thing. There are going to be days where you are going there and situations where you're going to say this, I can't take it anymore, God, I'm done. Fortunately, God blessed me enough that I remember hearing a saying, and it was called "It's just one more day," and it was like whenever you've had enough and you don't think you can do it anymore, tell God just one more day. And so, whenever it was with the house, whenever it was with the baby, whenever it was with all the blessings, um, one of my things was whenever, and obviously there's going to be a day when you're tired. I'm not talking about tired. I'm talking about when you're done, when you're ready to not exist anymore because the pain is there and you're like, I just want a pain pill to take all of this away. I want peace. I want to be alone for a minute. You get to that spot and you it seems like there's no coming back. And so for it's one thing to have like a cut on your hand. You can put Neosporin, a doctor visibly, somebody can visibly help you with that. When you hold it in on the inside, we're here for help. We're here to help. I'm no doctor. I'm definitely not a profession of the Bible, but I let the Lord work through me. So the Lord knows what you're going through. I am open and willing to the Lord. So if it's something that if there's anybody listening to this and that is a thought, that is a process that's going through your mind right now, I would like to give you just hear me out on this one more day. I'm talking when you're done. There's going to be days when you're tired. You're going to work a 12-hour shift. You're going to go to, I'm going to bring this again, so I hope Caitlin's listening to this. You could go to the happening and spend 3 full days with young teenagers and get 6 hours of sleep and be
Throughout the 3 days.
absolutely tired, absolutely wore out. Um, that's not the end. I'm talking about the end is that feeling of, I don't want to exist anymore. People aren't going to miss me, so I'm going to do this quietly. Whenever, like you said, whenever you strategically think about ways that you can do it, so that way it's not as messy, it's not as hurtful, you're at almost as low as it gets. When you've reached that point, one more day, say, God, I'm letting it go. I'm giving it one more day, and that next day is going to be completely yours. Let him have that day. Let him have a chance. Give him an opportunity because there are 3 of us right now who have dealt with anxiety, depression. I don't want to speak for Zach, but suicidal thoughts, suicidal attempts. Those are real, and it doesn't make you any less Christian if you think those. Because here's what it is: we're humans in a world that we're not supposed to really be in. We're intended for heaven. We're down here to help each other. Our bodies don't naturally, that's why we die. That's why we die, folks. As brutally honest as it is, that's why we die. We're not intended for this. We're intended to be with our Father. You're going to have rough days. You're going to get sick. These things are going to happen. We've got bodies. Remember, hand it to Him. Just hand it to Him, guys. That's all I really have.
And I mean, he'll bring you to it to make you stronger. It's like building muscles. You got to get ripped and torn apart and broken down. That way you can grow and come back even stronger.
Well, I like that.
So he's going to bring you to it and bring you through it. That way you can further build up his kingdom.
Yeah.
So to land this long 2-hour plane ride that we have here,
Sorry for the disturbance in the air.
2 questions I have for you. One, what has been your favorite piece of art that you've ever made?
Oh my.
And I'm sure that goes back years upon years of thinking, just like it would for me. But what has been your favorite piece, or what has been the most impactful piece for you?
I would probably say, this is going to be weird, but an urn that I made for my aunt. It was a butterfly, and when she, excuse me, when she passed, I made the urn for her ashes. It was just such a, I can't really explain it in words. It was just a very connected, prayerful thing. God laid it on my heart. I knew she had gotten sick, and God kind of laid it on my heart to do that. And I hadn't told anyone. I was just going to kind of throw it out there. And the day she passed, the family called and asked if I could make something in her honor, and I had already made it. So it was kind of a God allowed me to use my gift to help them, and it was kind of a just a symbolic. She loved butterflies, and as I know this is going to sound out there, but as I was carving it, it was, I could show you the picture of it. A butterfly came down. As I know this is going to sound woo, but it did. As I was carving, I had put my chainsaw down, and a butterfly came and landed on a stump beside me, and it looked so much like the butterfly that I had carved. I just sat down and cried. And it was like God allowing me, I think, through just Him sending me a butterfly, just to know, hey, you know what? I'm in everything. Everything, that DC talks, or maybe it's Toby Mac. I see you in everything. I do. I am so sentimental. My husband cracks me up because we'll go on a horseback ride, and we went on one down at Shepherd the Hills, and they were videotaping the thing, and you can hear me through the whole thing. Oh my gosh, isn't that log beautiful? Isn't that? I wish I could get that wood at home. I wish I see beauty in other people's trash. Matter of fact, when we leave here, I'm going dumpster diving. I love to do that. But I go, not, now let me clarify, not just dumpster diving. I go to construction sites. I love, people throw so much good stuff away. And there's a lesson in that too, because a lot of people, they throw things away that should not have been thrown away. In my backyard, I have built an entire 13 by 13 gazebo, and I have not spent a dime on it. And I'll invite you guys over when it's finished because we're going to have a big barbecue out there. But I have built the entire thing out of scrap wood from these construction sites. All new wood, except a few pieces that I got from a guy's deck when he was throwing away his deck. And so there's a couple of 13-foot pieces of wood. But, people like me, a lot of people would just say, oh, she's too damaged. She's too broken. She's emotionally detached, because I am very emotional. I get but you know what? God has been so good to me that I can afford to be emotional, and it's okay. I used to not be okay with that, but I'm okay with that. I'm emotional. I'm delicate, and yes, I hold a chainsaw, and I could probably whip up on you too, but but no, I am a delicate flower, and I'm a child of God, and I'm glad of that.
And then lastly, what's the next step for you guys, you and your husband?
Oh, I have no
So
clue.
you've talked about serving, in the youth or, something like that. Would he eventually like to get up and be on rotation and
We were youth
preach?
leaders for years, and we felt like we got too old. So now I feel like I am to that age. This is awful because my mind says I'm 21 again, but my body says, you wish, sister. So I am 52 years old, going on 84, I think. I have got arthritis. I've got so many men in the bed with me. Arthritis, Ben Gay, what are the others? But what is I saying?
You were talking.
Where was Don going? He definitely is pursuing ministry. I don't think we will ever have our own church. I think God has sent us here as a help. I don't know where God is. You'd have to ask Him on that one. We share everything. We don't have to. If anybody asks me, would Dawn like to da da, I can usually tell you because we're so much. We finish each other's sandwiches. So, but on that end, I would have to say ask him, because I know where I think he will be or go, but I would let him say. I've been married long enough to know not to step in that pile. But as far as me, I will serve. I'll do whatever they want me to do. I'll clean toilets if we need to. But I would enjoy being in youth or young kids. Or I'm very crafty and very not good at it, but I love it. like object lessons, and I'm very dramatic. I know my brother. Just ask my brother. He told me I'm the most dramatic person he's ever seen. But I, I I speak to kids like I would like the. I speak in their language because not in their language. Good Lord, I don't even understand their language anymore. I don't know what ratchet and crutch and whatever they were with their terminology. My 14-year-old granddaughter, she gets on to me all the time. Nana, if you don't know how to use that lingo, don't say it because you just sound dumb. So anyway, but I can speak in their language as in I get it. I've been there. I get it. I did grow up in a different world, but if you want an analogy of that kind of stuff, it's still the sour soup that I was served.
Right.
And hurt still hurts. Yeah. So, but yeah. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, basically it just sounds like you guys are ready to dive in home church wherever.
I was ready to dive in right off. My husband jokes with me all the time because I am, if I'm not involved in everything, I have to rein myself back because I want to do it all. I want to just everything. I want to whatever you need, I'll do it. And so yeah, he's always telling me just stop, just take a breath because I'll dive in, and I've got 50 irons in the fire and 25 projects going all at once. If I ain't busy, I'm in trouble. So.
But I think that's it. Unless Nathan, you got something else you want to add to it?
No.
So, Sarah, we want to thank you for being on the podcast today. It's been a lot of fun. It's been emotional. It's been fun. We've laughed. We've cried, and all the fun stuff in between. So, again, thank you for being on, and it's been really, really cool to get to hear your story and get to know you better.
Yeah, you guys too.
Alrighty, guys. Per usual, tomorrow, 9 o'clock, start up, getting this bad boy on the road. Pastor Rev had him a 5-pager last week, old bud. Bet he's taking us into the 12th inning tomorrow, so probably plan on a 10:45. He was hyped up this morning during prayers, so I got a feeling we're going to have a long one tomorrow.
Ooh, dear Jesus.
And
his message will be like the mercies of God. It has no end.
Just for those that are keeping up on track of our schedule of the podcast, we had to change the schedule. Next week is to be determined, and then we have Rev, the one and only, coming on. So he won't be on the 1st, but he'll be on the 8th now. So thanks for listening, guys. We love you all. See you tomorrow. Stay blessed.
Deuces.